Hey there my friends, Samuel here from Samuel Art. Welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the world of 3D modeling, texturing, and rigging. Today I'm excited to share with you a comprehensive tutorial on rigging an airplane in Maya. Or would that be a core fighter? Well, whether you're a beginner or looking to refine your skills, this video is packed with essential tips and techniques that will help make your rigging process smooth and efficient. Rigging is that crucial step in bringing your 3D models to life, allowing for realistic movements and animations. In this tutorial, we'll cover everything from proper labeling and unique naming of model parts to creating and orientating joints, and finally setting up a master control curve to control everything seamlessly. So let's dive right in. First things first though, we'll start with proper labeling. It's essential to keep your project organized by giving all the model parts unique names. This not only helps in troubleshooting, but also makes it easier to manage your complex rigs. So I've got my scene all loaded up right here. As you can see, this looks pretty crazy, this skeleton. I've got a separate layer for my 3D model part, which is right here. I've got my core fighter. Everything's pretty much set up and we are ready to go with this thing. So let me just expand everything in our outliner. So I'll show you what we've got going on here. So you can see we got a lot of different items. Now I've grouped this a certain way. As you can see, I've got multiple groups. My main model group is separated from everything else. See, I've got a lot of bones here, and then just the poly model stuff. That's all we've got going on in this scene for right now. I've got a main root group, and then I've got my primary group. So the reason I have so many different groups is it's going to make animating a lot easier down the road. So I'll be able to control it from not only this group, but I can also go back to my root node, which will be the primary control node for this setup that we're going to be doing. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, naming everything is so important. As you can see, I have given each component a specific name. And not only is this important for troubleshooting, and plus it looks pretty darn cool, but that's just my opinion. If you're working in a pipeline where this project's getting tossed down to an animator or the guy who's working on the textures, it's just going to make life so much easier for each party that's involved in this, especially when you start putting in a bunch of different model assets into one scene and you've got all this stuff going on. You don't want to have a bunch of P sphere 0 5000 or something like that, and you're trying to figure out, oh my goodness, what in the world is this mesh that is causing all these problems right now? P sphere 5000. Oh boy, where is that in this scene? So that can get to be pretty crazy real quick, but if you look here, I've got core left wing main. Well, there's my left wing right here. I can click anywhere on my model here, and I've got a nice fancy name for it. Fuse main. And then we've got, of course, the tail right here, main. So just if you guys are just starting out, I highly recommend. I know it's an extra step, and in the heat of the moment you can just go crazy with your projects and just start cranking out shapes left and right, but it's always good to get in the habit of naming your meshes and just keeping everything nice and organized. Not just only your meshes, but you can see my skeleton too. Let me turn this layer off. I've got a name for each component in the skeleton. That's going to make it really easy when it comes to animating too, because I'll know exactly which joint I need to select and which one's not. For the center line, you don't need to worry about any of the naming conventions for like left or right, but as you start to branch off like this wing, you'll notice I added core L. The L stands for left, and then if I select its mirror, I have it as right for that. Let me show you guys a quick demo of what we can do with this. Create joints right up here, and I'll just add a couple of joints, and they're really small because I'm working in full scale for this. I'm planning on importing this into Unreal, so I've got the exact size that I need for this core fighter. It's pretty crazy in size. That's my goal, is to get this project set up there. So we'll give this a radius of 12 so we can at least see. And I'll scroll all the way down here and show you guys real quick. So we'll name this core test tip JNT, and I'm going to go back and copy this so I can just core T. We do want to put lowercase l. It doesn't have to be lowercase I. It's just a force of habit. I've been doing this for so long where it's just lowercase. You can put a capital L if you want. But it's important that you kind of have the consistency. So if you're going to use lowercase, make sure you use lowercase on pretty much everything. And you'll see why in just a second. Main joint, J and T for joint. So here we are, we have this, and because we're going to delete this in just a moment, I'm going to attach it actually to this joint right here. And as you can see, hopefully you can see, this is kind of some bad. Let's actually put this on a separate layer real quick so we can actually see what's going on. I'm going to put my core skeleton group into its own layer. And we will name this as well, core joints. And we'll make this maybe a boom in your face red and hope this really pops. Oh yeah, there we go. That looks a lot better. So here's the joints that we just created, and we named them all core/L for left. And what I can do now is I can go up to the skeleton tool and mirror joints. I'm going to click this right here. As you can see, I use this quite often. I'll just zero this out. For this scene, I'm going to be using the Y and Z axis. And what I'm going to do, so you can see how we labeled it, /L/ or lower slash. I'm going to type that right here. So we're going to search for that, and I want to replace it with an R, and that'll represent right. So all I got to do now is click mirror. As you can see, it mirrored those joints right over. And as to be expected, now it says R for right, R for right, and R for right. So that's another handy reason why it's really important to label your joints. Just makes life just a lot easier, guys. Just super easy. And we all want an easy life, right? We don't like those hassles and headaches, and oh boy. But then again, you may love those hassles and headaches, and that could be why we're using Maya right now. Oh, my good old friend Maya. You have been with me for a long time. So let's go ahead and delete those. We are not going to need those. So we can now collapse these groups. We don't really need to see those. And you see it's just really something basic. I don't have anything in the core controls yet. That's where I'm going to put all my curves, and controls will be stored in there. And we'll just have a nice clean asset right here. It's going to be beautiful. So now I can turn off a little bit of housekeeping here. Before we move on, let me give you guys a few quick tips that'll help this process go a lot easier for you. If you have your scene like this one right here, where it's all textured and I've got shaders attached to it and all these other crazy colors going on, one nice thing, you can go right up here to this little icon right here, give that a click, use default material, and that's going to assign it just a standard default material. So now it makes everything really easy to see. I've got my model on a separate layer, so I can click right here. This is another good thing, and I can turn it into a template. You'll see it has this T for template. Now, when I have to select these bones, well, as you can see, I can't click my model at all. And then we also have a reference mode, so if you need to see it with that shaded view, just click it again for reference. You'll see a little R light up there. And once again, I still can't click this at all. But I can still click my bones real easily. When setting up joint orientation in Maya for use in Unreal Engine or any environment, it's important to ensure that your joints are orientated in a way that Unreal Engine can interpret them correctly, and that your animations will work as expected. Here's some basic practices for joint orientation. So here's what I'm going to do to make sure I have my joints orientated correctly. I've got everything, as mentioned earlier, labeled beautifully. We'll just click our root, which is going to be the very first joint in the chain line. We'll go up here to select, click on hierarchy. So now I've got everything selected. And I've got this here mel script. This comes in super handy. You don't need it, but I'm going to use it just to show you guys just what's going on. So basically what I did is I just turned on all the axes where the joints are orientated. You see I've got the X going forward here, pretty much all the way through. To do this, we'll just go up to our skeleton, orient joint, and we're going to click the option box. And I'm going to go ahead and reset these. So pretty much this is all the default settings now. I'm going to uncheck this box. Reorient the local scale axis. We don't need that for this. And I'm just going to click apply. And you can see everything pretty much matches up. Now, I saw an error just a moment ago. Let's see what that was all about. Cannot perform joint orientation on core base rudder joint. Well, this is a good reason why we label our stuff, so we've got a problem right here. Let's see if we can find that. Paste it into my search right here. Let's quickly diagnose this. Although there's usually never a quick way in life for many of these problems. Alright, so we've established that these guys are our culprits. It's going to be this joint, and then the opposite side, the right side. And a quick look at it. Here's my rotate Y and Z. They've got some values on there. So the quickest way to address this, we're just going to go here to our modify, freeze transformations. Boom, that just zeroed that out. And we'll do that with the other side real quick. Modify, freeze transformations. And now we'll just run that script again, and we should not have any more errors in that. So now I've got everything orientated just the way I want it to be. Let's just confirm. Actually, let's check our script, but I did not see any error pop up. Looks good, nothing. We are ready to move on in just a moment. But let's just check. And one way I like to do this is just twist it in a random direction. You're usually going to want your Z-axis though. And you can see how it's operating just as we would want it to. It's kind of cool, isn't it? That is wild. Almost like a bird flying. That's crazy. Alright, before I get too carried away. So we're back into everything zeroed out. So let's go ahead and make that control curve now. I'm going to switch to my top view. And whoa, I can barely tell what's going on here. So let's go ahead and disable the grid for now. And we need to address this issue real quick. Select hierarchy. Go back to my rigging tab and turn all that off. There we go. And let's save once again just for the fun of it. So what I like to do for the control curve, I'm going to go to a NURBS circle. We're going to drop that down. If I just deselect this, we're never going to find it, because this thing is just crazy to scale. Let's try 50. Well, look at that, 50, and we've got this little baby circle here. That's crazy. We don't need anything too crazy with this. I'm going to give it about 12 sections, just so we can make kind of a cool outline of this. I'm going to turn my joints off and turn my core fighter on. That looks good. Let's go ahead and control vertex. And I'm going to switch to my scale tool. I'm just going to give it an outline. Let's bring those in. Doesn't have to be too precise. I'll bring that in. I kind of want it to be even all around though. Maybe we'll just puff this out just a smidge. Just like so. I like that. Let's go ahead and switch back to our perspective mode. Now we have this right on the ground. And I'm going to turn my model off and I'm going to turn my joints back on. Now, here's where a big decision comes in. I've got my root core right here, which means where I want to control this thing. And you can see it's definitely in a different odd position. It's going to pivot around here. When we oriented those joints, we lost the true XYZ axis, so it's orientated to the axis that it's pointing in the world space here. So we've got to address that. And then we've got our control curve. We can leave it here on the ground, but when you select this, you're going to be controlling the core fighter or your airplane like this. And our root is right up here where I want it to pivot from its axis point. So that's definitely not gonna be good. So what we're gonna first do is I'm gonna select my control curve. I'm also gonna name this Core Fighter Control. And I'm gonna hit the insert key on my keyboard. It's gonna bring up this little tab here. I'm gonna hit the V key now. I'm just going to see how it starts to snap. I'm going to snap that to my root joint. I'm going to get in there pretty close because I've got another joint that's lurking in there. I don't want to actually snap that to him. So we'll get rid of that. So now when I decide to select my control curve, it pivots right where I want it to. Just like that. Alright, and one thing I like to do with my control curves, I'll just select it. I'm going to go to the attribute editor, make sure I'm in the main control, and display. I'm going to scroll down till I find drawing overrides. I'm going to go ahead and click enable overrides, and I'm going to give this a unique color. Usually there was that bright blue that I like. Oh, there you are. This, and now when we deselect, it's always going to be that color. So now I know, oh, there's my master control curve. It's real easy to find. And as we go through this, it's a good habit to have, and I have it on my shelf, freeze transformation. This is extremely important, guys. I can't emphasize this enough. For these control curves to work, you always want to make sure you have everything zeroed out. Because if you don't, so here's an example. Say this aircraft is flying away, and it landed right over here. Well, we got ourselves a problem here. We've got these crazy numbers, and if I decide to go hit 0 on them, well, it's close, but if you look closely, it's not even on that root joint. So we've definitely got a problem. And as you can see, it started out, because I didn't have it zeroed out, that 7 made that much of a difference. So it's really important to make sure you always freeze transformations, the scale. Later on, once we get this all set up, you'll be able to scale it up or down. But when you want to restore your default settings, you've got it zeroed out, you're going to be golden. So definitely a habit to get into. Let me show you a real quick example, because I've got a whole bunch of controls that I've got to make. So I started making my first control over here, and usually for a human skeleton, you're going to be using a bunch of IKs and spline curves and all that crazy stuff. For this, I am going to have this all kind of set driven key, and it's going to be powered by this. So these are going to be my controls. As this thing moves, this joint is also going to wind up moving with that So I've got to make a whole bunch of controls for each one of these, and then we'll have it set driven because this particular core fighter folds up. It transforms, and that's going to be fun. I'm actually really looking forward to that in this project. It's going to be awesome. But that's what I've got to do. So here's my process of working on primary control curves for this. So you can see I've got it named. I'm going to group it to itself, and I probably should have copied this to make life easy. And then I'm going to select in my outliner the new group that I just made, or I could just push the up arrow key and that'll take me to the top here. And I'm going to move this control, and I'm going to name this SDK. And I always make these groups, and SDK stands for set driven key. So when I need to keyframe things, I can keyframe those things in this group without having to do any keys on this. And for some reason, if I needed to use this particular node for something, well, it's right there accessible, and I have it all zeroed out. At least it's about to be zeroed out. And I can begin to animate it that way as well. So I always like to have a control within a control. And again, it's very important if you're labeling everything correctly. It won't be confusing at all, but if you do not label like we mentioned at the beginning of this video, it's going to turn into a nightmare pretty fast. So I've got my control curve right here, and I've got my set driven key right here. And now the other important thing, I got to hit insert on my keyboard, and then I got to vert snap this pivot point right here because I need both of those to be exactly in the same. So as I scroll through both my nodes, they are exactly in sync and lined up with each other. I will click both of these now, freeze transformations. So now when I select that, we're zeroed out. And then when I select that, it's zeroed out as well, and we're golden with this. And I'll just continue making these control curves, as many as I need for this project, till I get all the control curves that I need. A lot of these I don't need to. It's mainly with the transformations and then some of the key points in the landing gears, but I have the engine turbines here, which I could make a control, but I'm going to have a set-driven control for that, and that'll be a part of the master control here. And then the wing folding thing will have its own controller curves too. So I've got quite a bit of work cut out for me, but it just makes it fun. And this is always exciting, especially when you start see this thing transform. I'm looking forward to that. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on a bunch of these controls, and we'll pause the video for a bit. I'll come back. Alright, I'm back now, and I've added a couple more control curves, so I finished this one off. I've got it all labeled up, and then I've got the fuselage control setup, and then the primary root base. Now this one isn't an actual root node. As you can see, it's that one that's right next to my actual root, which is right here, and I've been called this one skeleton base. So they're very close. I almost stacked them on top of each other, but I didn't want it had even more confusion to trying to find this. So I did it this way. So one thing I totally forgot to do, we can do this real quick, is bind some of this stuff to the actual skeleton that we made. This is always a fun part. So I've got here my front section, and I want to attach it to this here bone right here, the forward bone. So what I'm going to do is select my mesh first, select my bone, I'll go up here to skin, click on bind skin options. I have joint hierarchy, joint selected. Now the nice thing about these mechanical things, we don't need to really worry about the weights and the distribution of them. It's going to be 100%. So for this particular project, I'm just going to put selected joint, and that's going to put 100% of everything onto this joint. We'll just click apply and close. So now when I select this joint, look at that, it's going to follow along with that, just as to be expected. That is awesome. So what we can do now, let's get these controls all set up here. I'm going to disable my mesh so we can see what's going on. So this is really easy. For this first one, the only axis it's going to be using, it's going to be the move, the translate. So I'm going to want to constrain those. I'm not going to really care about the rotate or the XYZ axis or anything like that. So we'll lock those out. but I think a point constraint is going to be the best option we have here. So what I'm going to do is select my curve, select my joint, go up here to Constrain, and we could use a parent constraint, but that's going to constrain both the rotate, the scale, and all that stuff. And again, I just want to constrain the translate. Make sure you have maintain offset checked. We'll just go ahead and click add. So now when I select my control curve, if I did this correctly, see that whole joint moves. So again, I can always go here, just click 0, and I've got it zeroed out, and I know I'm right where I need it to be. Let's turn this mesh on so we can see what's going on. So I can go ahead and click this control curve, and then I'll be able to animate as it slides into place there. Beautiful. And now we'll disable this mesh once again. Let's clean this up just a little bit here. I don't need these, so I'm going to right click, lock, and hide selected. So now all I've got is just these, so I can't accidentally fumble and hit the wrong controls. Really, I only need that Z axis. This thing is not going to be going up, down, and hopefully not all around. I can always go back and fine-tune that down the road. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click our next controller. I'm going to click the next joint that's down the line. Now this one, I'm going to need to do a Constrain, Orient. Do I want to maintain the offset? Let's see what happens if I don't maintain that offset. Whoa. What in the world happened there? Oh man. Well, we better call the insurance claim number and report a disaster in the hangar. That is not good. So let's go ahead and undo that, because that is just crazy. And we're back in normal mode there, thank goodness. No more damage on that. So definitely maintain that offset is super important. So when I turn it this way, it's going to wind up turning it in an angle I do not want that wheel to go. So we've got to address this. And there's a couple ways we can do this. I'm going to do it the easy way that I've done it for quite a while. And hopefully you guys learned something from this. Let's see here. So we've got to address this. And how we're going to address this. So there's many ways you can address this. I'm going to do it the way I usually do it for my animations, which seems to work pretty well. And I find it to be pretty easy. So we'll just go ahead and do it this way. So there's many ways to address this. But I'm going to do it this way. So as you can see, I've got here my control. And then as I mentioned earlier, I always group mine to a regular group node. This allows some flexibility with the SDK for set-driven keys. I'm not going to be adding any set-driven keys to this node, but it's going to prove to be very helpful for this particular case, because we're actually going to orientate this to the joint. That'll allow me to have these values 0, and I'll be able to move on from that. So let me show you how I quickly do this. We're going to select our bone. We're going to select our group, the SDK. We're going to go up here to Constrain. Click on Orient in the little box. Very important, make sure you don't have the Maintain Offset selected. Everything else, default, looks good to me. And we will just click Add. And right away you can see what happened. Our control is oriented now with the joint. So this is great. Unfortunately, it's going the wrong direction, but we'll get that fixed up in just a moment. I'm going to click this right here because I do not need that constraint anymore. There goes my mouse. I'm going to highlight these three. I'm going to right click on them, and I'm going to break connection. So that's going to allow me to still continue my pivot that I want, and it's going to break those constraints that I do not want. So now when I go click on that rotate, you can see that the rotation value is just how I want it. And when I click the main control, everything's zeroed out. So let's go up one. I've got this problem right here though. These numbers are not zeroed out. Now what I could do right here is I can right click again and lock selected values so I can't edit those anymore. I'll probably do that as a last step when I want to fully clean up this rig, but for now I'm just going to leave them alone. And our main control though that we don't need to worry about, delete that, I don't know, that didn't get deleted, that's weird, is fully functional now. So again, we can zero it out, we can animate it however we want, and then when we need to return it back to its default, boom, we're set up to go with that. The only problem though is we've got to adjust the direction this thing's going in. You could leave it that way, but it doesn't make sense to me personally, and I like to have everything kind of going in the same direction. It's going to be somewhat like this. We'll turn our joints back on to make sure. Wow, look at that. We are right where we need to be. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but we're pretty much there. I would say 99.9. And we'll just disable that again. And that's it for today's tutorial on orienting joints, creating control curves, and applying constraints in Maya. By following these basic steps, you can ensure your rig is easy to control and animate, making your workflow much smoother and more efficient. In the next tutorial, we'll go over setting up those set-driven keys, as well as modifying that master control rig so that way we can control everything from one control curve and make life really easy. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to Somnio Art for more tutorials on 3D modeling, rigging, and animation. Alright my friends, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Happy animating!